You know, even when you work 40 hours a week, there's still a lot of other time.
Sure.
You know, there is sacrifices to be made, but there's still a lot of time.
Right.
And energy to put stuff out.
Today's guest is Patrick McDermott.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Thanks for coming all this way.
Float away with me back in time for a minute to a small town's recreation center's basement basketball court in the dark. It's buzzing with kids flocking in for the heavily chaperoned monthly dance. A disco ball scatters light coins across the court. The excitement, the nerves, the hinted reek of floor lacquer and sweat. It's 20 years ago and it's middle school, and today's guest, Patrick McDermott, is the coolest guy in the room. While the rest of us are quaffing Mountain Dews and hiding from our crushes, Patrick is being mature and interesting, focused and at work, humbly leading his band, rifling through Creedence Clearwater Revival covers, rocking and rolling. In short, Patrick is a badass.
I was like 5'2" at the time.
Yeah.
A junior high savage, showing not so subtle early signs of promise as a creator, as a leader, as someone gutsy and organized enough to take charge to publicly perform for his peers' enjoyment. Fast forward 20 years to today, and Patrick's love and appreciation for music thrives still, in various ways professional and personal. He runs a record label called Driftless, a record label/record store called Ghost Ramp. He produces audio for video games and voiceovers, and thankfully, he still creates and performs his own music under the name North Americans. His most recent effort, titled Going Steady, which you'll hear throughout this episode, is excellent, offering an instrumental portal to a slower and more peaceful realm, where there are no such things yet as disco balls, or phone chargers, or alarm clocks. A compilation as fluid and searching and open as Patrick's outlook is on music and life. Constantly evolving, Patrick uses his resourcefulness to remain a dynamic player in the space, both as an artist and also as a businessman. An ongoing journey that began at home, thanks in part to a musician dad and a lot of freedom and some instruments in the attic.
You started early then.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was a musician, and it was that pretty natural, just kind of like it's around and sort of the handoff was there. And in a cool way, we were lucky enough to always have sort of spaces. We had a music room. And so just like as you did with kids, it was kind of an extension of almost just like the playroom or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think my parents also had the mentality where like there wasn't that much pressure to like, oh, you have to be so formally trained. Like there was this kind of early joyous version of it that wasn't like, you know, heavy-handed, like learn the instrument per se. I was just like, let's just like have fun with it, you know. And obviously, my dad, that being there to jam away, was like a pretty easy entry point.
He's a guitarist.
Yeah, guitarist, singer, and stuff. And you know, a lot of the early memories, even out here, we'd come to LA every year as like, you know, shows with his buddies that he used to play with back in the day, and it was definitely like just felt like a very normal, you know, part of the existence.
Yeah, that's cool. And so you started with the guitar.
Yeah, started with guitar essentially. I mean, obviously I had little keyboards and stuff as a young kid, just like noodle around with. But I think by what must have been 7th, 8th grade, just met a few like-minded buds and kind of, I guess, the first iteration of band life.
Yeah. And was it off to the races, or were you in love with it right away?
You know, it's so hard to remember. I think it was always fun, but like I don't have memories of my like within my scope where I was like, it was that thing where like, you know, you always knew what you wanted to be when you grow up type thing or something. But I remember it being, you know, feeling relevant. And then by the time I was in college, it was almost the losing it from my life was when I realized I wanted it the most, I think.
This is Bleeding Heart Tetra off of Patrick's album Going Steady.
kind of this nice thing when you're younger / no one, you're not, there's no pitchfork, there's no blogosphere, like
Yep.
weird. No, when no one's telling you something's weird or telling you it's, you know, has accolades, like you're in a purest way kind of interacting with it. It was one of the few things, like, you know, definitely as a, you know, 15-year-old from Massachusetts, I wasn't like a crate diving musicologist as a teen.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
well, there's something major there in this theme of like you're referencing when you were young and in your attic and your parents weren't putting the pressure on you to, like, you know, be a pro, and there wasn't this strict regimen. But like being able to approach something without structure and analysis with just this genuine interest. You weren't self-conscious about whether or not it was cool. You were just like, here's a song and it's coloring my life in some way and I'm connecting with it. Maybe you didn't even like know you connected with it, but you just felt it.
Yeah, it was there.
And then that there's something there that's beautiful and like you can't really pin it down, that it is endlessly interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, I think we all learn in kind of create in different ways. And for me, you know, maybe to a lack, like I'm sure I could have gone further in educating myself in certain aspects of, you know, even with guitar. I think from a young age I was good at it and like had the you know, all the sort of pedigree, like, you know, from the physical skill set was there, but I still like hit a limitation just learning, like being like, well, I don't want to study all this stuff, you know, whatever. But there, I think I'm still like, I think a lot of musicians echo that. Like there's still a level of, I'm so thankful I kind of like had my own approach to stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's this level of like kind of freedom and lack of direction that has I think unintentionally given me a lot of focus in life, but still allowed me to have, you know, tried and failed in all these different aspects of things because I didn't know what was right and I didn't have much of a focus on what that might be. It was more just a, you know, freewheeling sort of approach to it all.
Right. Off to college, Patrick found himself in Burlington, Vermont, where he began to take more seriously his music, thanks to a supportive community.
You know, Vermont couldn't be a more supportive place for like young, aspiring, you know, art adjacent people in all ways. Right. It was really, really cool. I mean, I remember my first, like, there's this pizza place called Manhattan Pizza of all things, and burnt a little like CD of our shitty little demos, and there's this like the guy like on, I don't even know if he listened, maybe I had to go back one more time, but said we could play on like a Friday or Saturday night. He gave us like $150 cash and like unlimited drinks and food, and like even by today's standards, like if you're in like a decent band, that was like a good it's like not that bad of a night. But the fact that we were just it was this cool place where like that was just part of the pedigree. There's 7 nights a week of music. They just need to fill the bill. They knew we were college kids with friends, just like, but it was cool to kind of be there's less gate kept. It was just like, come on down, try it, you know?
Sure.
So very quickly in that era, I was playing a lot of shows.
Yeah.
You know, whether they were all that good or not is unknown, but it was a really fun place to get going.
Eventually, the college scene ran its course, and Patrick headed to his home city of Boston, where his music world continued to expand.
I lived in a cool part of Somerville and did sound at a local bar there called Precinct, and that really ushered in an era of change. It was really fun, like doing sound. I mean, I was seeing 4 bands a night. You know, it was so much for 5-6 nights a week. It was such an inundation of other young people, and it was really exciting for me because, like, you know, it's pretty easy to get stuck in your own little box.
Sure.
And especially in college and in high school, you know,
there
wasn't, and you know, as you know, we're not from the most like creative place on planet Earth, so it was kind of easy to be one of the few people doing it, and then to be in a much more you know, creative neighborhood at a cool bar, you know, having that much more involvement. I was kind of humbling, really, being like, oh shit, well, you know what, I don't know, maybe I'm not. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot more to experiment with. There's a lot of exciting other things, and it sort of ushered in like kind of resting the initial kind of, call it high school, college era music, and sort of contemplating what might be next.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I stood by the concept in general of like, you know, wanting to be surrounded by people that are just that much better than you. It makes it's inspiring. I never have understood. I mean, I don't know how you could be at the top, especially when you're that young, you wanted to be surrounded by people at a higher tier, and
that urge, that intuition to be surrounded by other ambitious artists drew Patrick away from the safe harbors of home and south to New York, the city of dreams, where the cultural diversity and artistic activity opened more doors still.
New York, I don't care what discipline or world, it kind of happens quickly no matter what, and that really coincided with right when I moved down was also when I met Joel Ford, whose studio we're really in, and who I founded Driftless with, and has become my main sort of creative life partner, and it was a really special time for me because he was really doing amazing stuff, really had a kind of a buzzing moment in his career, and it felt so good to have someone of that ilk sort of again that sort of take that sort of mentor role. And we made some music, but if I couldn't get it released on a label that I wanted to, we weren't going to release it at all. And it never came out. We never got it signed anywhere, and so we just canned it. Still just totally shelved. But the point of that was sort of like I didn't want it to be some sort of vanity thing. I wanted it to be something that had a co-signed level of interest, you know? And I think that was something I had missed up until that and into that point, and it didn't quite land. But in a really amazing way, the kind of connection me and Joel built was well worth that experiment, and
definitely.
We both creatively and just from friendship side of things, we really got along, and Joel really made that Brooklyn move that much easier because he was so built into that scene and had already been there for 6 years plus. Was part of the big influx of artists, musicians, in the early 2000s that kind of defined the early North Brooklyn culture, and so much amazing music that came out of that era.
And allowed you to build relationships in that world, whether you were working with the other people or not. You were kind of in the mix.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was very. Yeah, it was so seamless. I mean, he would just introduce me as a friend, and a lot of those friendships happened to be people that had worked in the industry and led to first internships, first jobs, and we the second apartment I got in Greenpoint was literally across the street from his, like you can see his front door from my window kind of thing. And so it was just like very easy. Yeah. Everyone was around. You'd just be on the street, go and grabbing a coffee or a sandwich, and you'd run into someone else that would be, maybe even like someone I idolized or whatever. It was a really cool energy to be around, and definitely a massive transition from some really cool times in Boston or Vermont, but like just a different tier of kind of exciting top tier style people that were really inspiring to me.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about New York too. Is that you mentioned it, but whether you're in music or whatever it is, there's people there that are in New York chasing that thing. What happens when you get millions of people with that level of ambition and energy and creativity?
In one place,
it's a really cool feeling.
Definitely.
And just by being there, you inevitably are absorbing some part of it. And it's overwhelming, but it's also liberating.
Yeah.
And that's cool. So that was in your early 20s. You were exposed to that.
Yeah, and it was right when I moved down there right when I was like 24 going on 25.
Yeah.
So it was kind of right in the middle, and I'm glad I kind of grinded out some of those exploratory early 20 years, still doing it in Vermont and Boston and stuff. And I think if I was a little bit younger going to New York, I might not have been capable of even of knowing my place within it.
Yeah.
Like I was quickly humbled, but I was like mature, close enough to mature that I was like understood my role. More of a fly on the wall, more of listening, observing, not trying to. And even musically, I pulled back. I wasn't trying to like quickly create a stamp or a new project per se. I mean, this was such a fun era because it was more just kind of sponge, trying to be a sponge and absorbing it all. But having so many cool tools and people and just that, like you're saying, the kind of palpable energy of New York. And
this is Ty McDonald in conversation with Patrick McDermott, aka North Americans. This is another track off the album Going Steady. We pick up here with Patrick telling me about the label he started with his friend and creative partner, Joel Ford, called Driftless Recordings.
Driftless came together kind of right in the same moment where Joel and I realized we had like-minded kind of musical interests, but still have an approach that was slightly different. And we wanted to focus on our two different skill sets where Joel is, I was sort of kind of championing the organic instrumental side of the label. He was sort of championing the electronic dance, slightly more pop-oriented side, but still like avant things in that world. And the initial concept was to kind of like have something that aesthetically marriages those worlds. So we started working on like a lot of like friends projects or people were in bigger bands or that might want to release stuff that was a little bit weirder than their normal lane.
Sure. And so you as a label, break it down.
Traditional label model, you're supporting the band, you're providing, the financial resources to print physical records, you're providing PR to really reach out to the press side of things, you're hopefully acting as a liaison to touring and other aspects of the business. I think what makes, we're not the first to do it, but what made Driftless relatively unique in the space is that we were both musicians and Joel is an amazing producer. So a lot of the early projects where he was also in-house producing a lot of them.
Yeah.
So like beyond just the business side, there was a creative kind of level of collaboration that was relatively unique. And yeah, that's not unheard of in a label standpoint, but an artist kind of owned and run with a lot of collaborative energy. I was doing all the layout and design of the records. Joel is doing a lot of production and even compositional help and this and that. And so it I think in a familial way, especially because there was a lot of, at the beginning was a lot of like friends to start it with. It had, a real collaborative energy to it. And I think that's why I don't think I ever would have started a label on my own.
And that's still going.
Yeah. We're at release. My record that just came out was catalog number 037. So
going steady.
Yeah, going steady, literally. But yeah, we're 37 releases in. We're just coming up on 5-year anniversary.
Yeah. Congrats.
Thank you. And it's been pretty steady. I mean, I think it's obviously it's something we do amongst our other roles and gigs and stuff. But we've kept up a steady amount of releases. And then the last year we've seen a big uptick as Joel and I have reconnected. He's since moved to LA. So we're around each other more, and it just kind of leads to more projects and stuff.
Nice.
What we're striving for now more than ever is like a continuity and even more collaboration as we're in the same place,
Yeah.
Which it's easier than ever to communicate from afar, but it's still hard to replicate, what it means to just be in day-to-day physical contact.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Inevitably there's so much more that comes to the table when you're with somebody in person.
Big time. And I think that's what, even that sort of mentality we're trying to sort of build on in a way that is, as music is more digital and the distribution is changed to streaming and it's becoming less personal, it's even more exciting for us to do more not just do label side only stuff, do more shows, have Driftless lend its hand to curation of a small festival, is work as much as we can with actually engaging humans in person.
Right.
And if that's genuinely the most fun part of the whole process, but it's exciting to have a bit more means to do that now that we're in person again. And
well, that's an interesting dichotomy. As we do get more digital and everything gets very convenient online, and you can engage with people, you can have a career with people without ever seeing them.
Yeah.
And then what happened? It's interesting to your point. Like maybe that makes people more appreciative of having a festival or meeting with somebody in person or collaborating on a record in the flesh.
Totally, for sure. And I think that it's even, I even notice it when I go out to a great gig or just out to a bar where I know there'll be like-minded kind of folks. Like sometimes I'm hesitant or I'm late, just want to stay in, do this. And then every time I go to one of those shows, I'm like, why am I not doing this more? And I think it's still a really special part of the human experience no matter what. And even as we kind of get in these, Netflix and chill zones or whatever, it's like it's really special to get out and do it. And I'm reminded, I'm make that mistake or selfishly kind of avoid gigs I should go to just because I'm feeling like, it's been a long day, whatever. But every time I go, I'm impressed by how, special the connective sort of tissue of it all is. Staying at home or being in your own zone is like sort of this self-care, like in a good way, like wanting to maintain a level of relaxation in these busy worlds.
Definitely.
But I think the best shows and best social experiences, like they're still kind of breeding a level of, sort of self-care through a different lens. But it's like, I think sometimes my brain's like, I'm going to have to go out and make small talk with some weird person or drink an extra 2 drinks just because I'm stressed or bored. Right. But most of the time it's the better, situation. Yeah. But I think I often get in that routine too, where it's like, it's just not going to be fulfilling. And then most of the time it turns out to be wonderful, especially, and that's a testament to great promoters, great venues, spaces. I think consistently curating well, which is an extremely big challenge, because to have a space that has 5, 6, 7 nights of entertainment, to like have consistency through that is really hard. But I think more than ever now, if those spaces that do that well are just so valuable, because it means you can go without even looking at the poster or who's playing, and you still know you could have an amazing night. And here in LA, there's I think a few spaces that are really doing that, and those are the ones I'm sure like 20 years down the line in life, you're like, wow, like that. It's like that amazing teacher you had in college or high school. It's like that was the thing that made my life so full, even if you didn't like know it right at the moment.
Yes, yeah, beautiful. And even if you didn't like get something objective out of it.
Totally. And it didn't have. And this is can just be from a pure fan perspective. It didn't have to be like you were the performer, you were the promoter that made the money. Yada yada. It's just like I'd like to think that we're still all in this for some level of kind of just general human rapport and interaction and even positive reinforcement, whatever you want to call it.
Connection.
Still comes from the desire for it still is more, actively in the in-person space than just like checking the royalty report or whatever.
This is Cuddy off of the album Going Steady.
Not my day-to-day income stream isn't my personal music, and may never be. But it was still something being like, hey, this is worth kind of keeping within your life. And then this past year, it was been really fun working on the new record, Going Steady, which is still a more accessible version. It's it's
amazing, acoustic
guitar, drones, and kind of this meditative landscape.
It's a great record. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I've listened to it on repeat, on loop while working, which is what I love. One of the things I love about instrumental music is it's complementary, but it doesn't distract me the way lyrics will.
Yeah, totally.
And so I've been listening to it on loop, and it's well done.
That's awesome, man. No, I appreciate it. And then that was sort of I think that's what I'm drawn to instrumental music in a lot of ways too, is that you kind of build your own narrative, and even if whether you're in a work space where you want it to be more of just like a turning background ambient thing, or if you're even in a creative headspace and you want it to like almost be like a soundtrack for what you're dreaming up.
Yeah.
I think instrumental music lets you be the director a little bit more, where, I think you can still do that with lyric music, as you can interpret it however you want or something like that. But there's something, I don't know, removing voice and lyrics to me makes music a lot weirdly more listenable a lot of the time. Not in a way that's any better. It just, depending on where I'm at, but a lot of the time I'll lean that way if I'm just trying to listen in a pure sense,
Yeah. And so you mentioned earlier your instrumental influences. Who are some of those people?
For me, it was funny. Growing up, I had this weird phase, or not weird, but a phase that was very formative that I didn't really notice at the time, where I was listening to a lot of like flat picking style, kind of bluegrass influenced guitar, but people like Doc Watson.
Yeah.
And I had this CD in this little boombox next to my bed, and it was like I had this one Doc Watson CD, and it became this nightly just like sleep like piece that I would throw on. And there was some instrumental like rags and like kind of classic playthroughs. And then as my dad just being a guitar player, there was even some classic rock iterations, Stephen Stills, guys that would still play instrumental focused pieces. Like maybe one song on a record would be very instrumental leaning.
Yeah.
And kind of got drawn to it. And then my brother got really into this kind of virtuosic era that was of guitar playing, because we always kind of had that pedigree of like loving the guitar. And then, if you go down one lane, you get more of the like shredder guitar guys. But in a cool way, there was this weird era, Joe Satriani, Eric Johnson, Steve Vai, these kind of like almost hair metal guys. And then, on another end, you have the Stevie Ray Vaughns and the Buddy guys and B.B. King, the more blues guitar players. But still, like, there was an emphasis on solos and emphasis on instrumental playing. And as my brother got super into that, I was always very interested. It was still like a little bit more advanced. I think even from a young age, I like knew I was never going to have like maybe the extreme virtuosity, but I still thought that I could like carve a path within, guitar as an instrument.
Yeah.
And then we kind of went from there to this era of kind of the new age style guitar players that, are really part of the canon of a lot of fingerstyle stuff. Michael Hedges and Will Ackerman and some of the guys. I mean, Hedges was on my radar, and then I got really into some of the more contemporary kind of guys. I think people view them in the guitar world as a bit more tacky. Like at the time, I knew nothing about like what was in vogue or what was cooler or more real. I was just like 16 and exploring I guess it was even pre-YouTube for a lot of this stuff. But this dude Don Ross and Michael Hedges, Andy McKee. These more like kind of like slapping, and it was all just like really interesting, fully virtuosic guitar work, but just like extreme skill set. They're extreme, studied. In this level where it's like in awe of what they can do. But it was, very much still in my lane in the sense that like a lot of the guitar tunings were open. It was melodic, where it was sort of replacing vocal melody and stuff like this. And so once I was down that lane, I kind of really it became, even when I was still very much like, not regress, but I was listening to a way smaller subset of music than I would be now. Mm-hmm. I at least still had this kind of weird progressive instrumental guitar leaning part of my life, My friend Hayden Pedigo, who's an incredible guitar player who we released on Driftless, also from Amarillo, Texas, he came up to LA and he kind of helped me craft the first tunes of this thing, and it was that kind of simple sort of aha moment. We're like, all right, it's a very simple formula we have here, but it is working within what I was hoping it, the way I kind of dreamt it up.
Good. Yeah, so you feel good about how it turned out.
Yeah, I love it. And it worked with a bunch of great friends, and that collaborative thing was there. And now, and I feel like all the effort I put in, I did all the PR with my girlfriend and put all this. I put a lot of effort into like releasing it, and the response has been solid in a way that I guess it just validate is the wrong word. Like it just inspires to keep kind of using the momentum just because why not? You spend time on doing these things, and so continue on. So I'm happy with the music, but it very quickly I'm excited. The next ideas that me and Joel even have for it are more ambitious and more exciting, but I'm glad even this kind of we pulled it to its simplest form, and it still feels pretty good, and people seem to have enjoyed listening to it a bit. So like it was a total success in that way, where like the search for simplicity was the real quest, and you know, which can be a challenging one at times, and I think it succeeded within that kind of scope a bit.
It is cool to see that this sort of old-fashioned acoustic instrumental record can be very relevant and inspiring and uplifting in today's world.
Totally, and I think it's still the kind of music that most people don't know they might need or like.
Or they might overlook it. You take it for granted.
And very understandably. I mean, it's not the thing you quickly might jump out at, but in a cool way. I think when presented, a lot of people, even if they're not used to kind of drone-centric music or repetitive music in this vein, it like at the end of the day, it's not that abrasive. It's something that I think it felt relevant to me in 2018 in a simple sense of like, you know, in the very obvious way, our attention spans and all these things are kind of out the fucking door at this point. It's nice to have something that is a little bit escapist in that way, and
slow it down a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of ambient music is the heavy repetition and drone elements of this one, like kind of try to force that sort of like kind of getting lost sort of feeling.
Sure.
Patrick is realistic and optimistic about the present and future of the music world.
I'm on the camp of that. There's just truly incredible music being made at every corner, and I'm not, I don't fetishize the old stuff. There's so much stuff I absolutely adore, but I think there's just really, from a creative standpoint, there's just infinite, it's an astounding amount of incredible music being made, and then even amongst just what feels like my friend group and the world around, it's such an inspiring place for that. So, fiscal stuff aside, it's in as good a place as it's ever, and the ease of creation, yes, it's up to the volume. Anyone can make music now and quickly record it and have it on the internet and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I still think that's mostly a good thing. It means more people, that someone who might have never ever attempted to make something could make the next Opus amazing album.
Sure.
Opening up to more people, having more diverse groups of people taking those roles. Yeah. Seeing more, that it's such an important part of the transition, the changing the guard, way more female artists, way more people of color. Like, it's just a way better place for representation, and that's really exciting. From an entrepreneurial angle, like so many exciting people and labels and small PR companies, small sync companies. Like, there's this sort of boutique and DIY nature of it that I love and totally prefer. I wasn't alive in the heyday per se, but the camaraderie level seems like an all-time high, and it's really exciting in that way. I do wish and hope that things like I think for streaming music to be relevant, there might have to be government intervention on standards for price per stream for things. There's got to be a way to I think music really got devalued to a point where, understandably, it's hard to charge people for it because
it's free.
When it's free, how do you then take it back? Yeah. So, there's a lot of I'd hope that there's ways that we can, whether it's legislate or just hopefully a small cultural shift of some kind, that there's more back end ways to get paid, because it is a really challenging model for independent artists, and even when you look at these stats that if a big Billboard report comes out that the music industry is doing better, it tends to mean that it's doing better at the top. Yeah. Just like everything in the, this kind of life, there's a lot of kind of 1% level successes that aren't quite trickling down. Yeah. But the optimist in me thinks like it got so bad that basically it's hard for it to go and get any worse financially. So one would like to think that it would only trend upwards.
Yeah. It's neat as an outsider to know that there is this monstrous machine of an industry encompassing music, but at its essence, it's the creator. It's always going to exist because of the heart of the creator.
Big time. Creators more than ever, and it, you know, kind of links the conversation, are independently fierce and skilled and more capable than ever, which is a really kind of an exciting time in that way. And I think that's, you know, people are surviving off that kind of diversified, like, all right, I can make some money from sync. I'm going to make most of my money from touring. I'm going to, hopefully my record has some passive income later in its cycle. I can get my publishing advance. You know, at this point I can get a record advance at this point, and like you're piecing together all aspects of the puzzle. Yeah. But like you're saying, you know, the no matter what, you know, industry beasts is out there, there'll always be people making, you know, amazing stuff. And in a cool way, I think a lot of the indie material, a lot of the more experimental materials, and informing pop music even more. And there's a lot of good, there's literally a lot of good things happening across the board. And I'd like to think those trends, you know, everything moves in a direction, you know, maybe it'll never reach quite some sort of heyday of royalties and sales and stuff, but it at least comes back to a little bit more of a sustainable zone would be awesome. Yeah.
And to not discourage the creator, someone who's finding success in a sense that they're getting a lot of listeners and a lot of you know, encouragement in the sense of like emotional support and fan support, but they're not making a living, and I can only imagine how discouraging that would be if you're busting your butt trying to make this work and you're getting feedback that suggests that it's successful, but then you're not making any money.
No, totally. And it's sometimes I think about, you know, you know, like a used car salesman at like the whatever Mercedes dealership in any adjacent town could like net the same amount of money as like a touring artist who sells out 2,000 tickets in every city. Yeah. And it's weird. It's like, think about the cultural impact of that musician versus the car salesman. When you realize when millions of people across the world like your music, it's such a strangely powerful thing.
I bet.
But then also to see that, yes, that makes you good money, but like, it's like, man, if in any other field, if it meant that you had that much connection to people's, you know, and really amazing connection, because it's usually a very personal connection. It's a emotional connection, and it's a really special thing, a relationship artists have with their fans. And, you know, it's crazy like how far you have to go in music to like make kind of some of the equivalent quantifying salaries that you might find as like a successful, you know, lawyer, doctor, whatever. It's a pretty astronomical feat. And the other kind of like, I feel like people don't like to talk about it much in the industry because it's like scary, is that like, you know, in other fields you tend to have like a upward trajectory, and in the arts a lot of times you have a peak and then it kind of peters off. You know, it's not just like your higher earning years aren't always like late, you know, they might be in your early 30s or late 20s, and then, you know, if your career changes, how do you know, it's like, maybe I can't tour as much. I'm literally older physically. Right. You know, it's like, what does that mean for your career outlook? You know, you know,
totally
say
unpredictable.
Like there's no 401k per se in music or arts. I mean, you can set it up. You can be very practical and set up your savings however you want. It's just not the most, you know, and the health insurance implications, all these other things that a freelancer, you know, obviously there's so many perks in a lot of, and people are built where this is their life and they're not going to change it otherwise. I mean, it would be wonderful to see a bit more support for, you know, artistic types, especially ones that succeed on that kind of tier. But mostly at the end of the day, I'm just inspired that they, you know, bands like whether it's Waves or other contemporaries in our world it's so cool that they are able to even reach that many people. And
playing the long game, Patrick has, I think, a refreshing and insightful outlook grounded in the premise of patience.
Like what's to say that something has to happen before you're 30 or you know, it's an odd mentality, and I think that I've been lucky to both my parents have had really amazing reinventions and different years of their life, and so it never felt imposed on to me in that way. But I totally get that that's a luxury. A lot of people have real rigid kind of expectations of what you know, what you know, you get married at this age and you have this type of job at this age and you want this level of stability at this age or whatever. And and that mentality often is pretty damaging for like, you know, any sort of creative pursuit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that conversation because it's a hard thing to balance. If you are ambitious, you want to say like, I want to have, you know, famous record by the time I'm 30.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you realize you're not going to get that. And then you're like, oh, I guess I'm not a musician. I guess I'm not what I thought it was.
Right.
But where it seems like you're approaching it like, no, this is sort of like an infinite game. And if one of my records gets, you know, well known in my early 20s, cool. But if it doesn't, also cool. The music, the creation is going to keep going, and my taste is going to change and refine, and maybe no one knows my work until I'm 80.
Yeah, like, which is I mean, that's been common throughout history.
But like releasing that pressure,
then
that's a new game you're playing.
Definitely,
you're like you take it easy on yourself.
Right, and I feel lucky. You know, it was definitely the more calculated side of my involvement in music was just like I think it would have been harder for me to. Some people can do this really well, I think, but I think for me to stay maintaining my connection to music, it would have been bold to like completely career shift.
Yeah,
and still be expected to come home and be inspired by it. You know, like if I had gone into politics or green tech or whatever.
Right.
I think it would have been a little harder to maintain my overall goals and interests. So I think in a practical way, I knew that, okay, whether it works on a personal level as a, you know, financially viable thing, to be an artist, I'll stay within the music industry, I guess, as a whole.
And you've done that all along.
Yeah, and that is what I think, that was the more calculated, practical side of me, but I think it really worked just in the sense of like, like when me and Joel, you know, collaborate on something, you know, we do a lot of work out of Driftless on other projects, and like, but the fact that we can still work together on music adjacent things that are still you know, financially viable, that help with other aspects of things, it still keeps, it's still music, and it's still, you're still coming in here, and whether it's a mix for a video game or it's a mastering project or voiceover or something that's happening at the studio, it's like, it's not exactly the plan, but you're still, you know, interfacing, you're so close to the same kind of methodology of everything, and still stay within it. So like you're always 1 degree away from like, oh, I'm working on someone else's record, but like even from working on my record, if I connected with some writer on a similar guitar style record, then that connection is going to be helpful for me when I'm sending my record out. And so I think that's been a fun part of like some of the day-to-day, you know, more job-based work I've had to do over the years has still felt fairly connected to the other pursuits. You know?
Yeah, and it's cool how, you know, the constraint, I guess, of not being able to make your living off music right off the bat has called forth your creativity in a different way to become more of a dynamic player in the industry, learning how to do other things you might not otherwise have had to learn, and the realization that it's all kind of fodder. Like every experience you can learn something from, and if it's all related to this particular field that you're interested in.
Totally.
Now that like these side or your work, your job work is now feeding your own creative work when you go have time to spend on that, and then you've seen other people try to, you know, market their record or find the right drummer or whatever it is that you've seen, watch other people do through the nature of your record label and your friends in the industry. Now when you're doing this going steady, I'm sure there's a lot more than you even realize how much you've learned along the way.
Yeah, no, big time. And I think there's something to be said. The years I've spent really developing sort of the business, both just the standard knowledge, not even just like the acumen of like what it takes to do it, but just the practical knowledge of all the back end bullshit of distribution and this and that. Like I'm glad I sort of chugged through it, because then it gives you, I feel like I have the ultimate level of sort of freedom, because I can do it all truly do it all myself. Like you involve collaborators, but it's like, it's a cool feeling to know that like push comes to shove, like I know how this stuff works, where it demystifies the process. I understand kind of some of the practical implications of what's what. I know what I might want to spend on, shouldn't spend on, you know, it's nice to have that. And yeah, like I would love to transition to more to that, you know, kind of pie chart or pendulum, whatever, like swinging a little bit more to like doing my own thing. But yeah, having all the tools from working on other people's music and other people's records is super invaluable, and kind of means I can definitely do stuff my own way and not have to lean on, you know, that many other, you know, pieces of the puzzle going forward. So it's an exciting kind of way to frame it.
I feel like business maybe gets overlooked in its what it asks of you from a creative standpoint. When you are starting your own business, how creative and how scrappy you have to be. And there's a lot to learn there, I'm sure.
Totally, man. I mean, it's funny, you worded it well. Like sometimes every now and then I'll see like, you know, understand there's a lot of back and forth between artists and labels, but every now and then I see like an article and an artist is like kicking back at their label super hard and kind of trashing like the suits or whatever you want to call. And there is that. But on the level that we work at, like I'll stand by it. Like some of the most quote unquote creative things I've ever done in my life have been, you know, wizardly weird business decisions to like keep Ghost Ramp alive or have a trajectory for Driftless. Like it's this, and I genuinely believe it comes from the same part of my brain as making some weirdo guitar song. It is funny to put it in those terms, but like it is such a, you really have to think outside the box, and in a cool way. The cool thing about working on records is there's still a lot of whether it's just picking the right band, to picking the right album art, to making the right t-shirt design. Some of those decisions are still very based in like objective artistic choices. But I still think a lot of the, you know, what's worked for us, the voice of our social media, the kind of feeling of the label aesthetic overall, the kind of moments we decide to push specific things, like it's way less clerical than I ever would have thought. You know, coming from when I had a more day-to-day label job. But no, I totally agree with your statement. I mean, a lot, especially in an era where when it's this hard to sort of stay afloat, there's an immense amount of creativity, collaboration, all the like things that I associate with actual creation of music, like a lot of that same skill set and even passion for it. Like there's days I get up, like the problem solving part of the label side is something that I genuinely like am excited about in the same way that I would be to like work on a tune or play a show.
That's cool.
Or whatever.
And they probably they probably feed each other too.
Yeah, and especially when it's funny, like especially with Driftless or like, I mean, really with both, it's like it's definitely what, you know, you get out what you put in kind of mentality, and like it's cool to see something work. It's humbling to see something sort of fail, but it's very direct at this level, especially when like your monthly income or, you know, keeping the lights on is like very just like tethered to how, you know, there's not that much of a buffer. So it's like it kind of has to work. And if it doesn't, it's not good. And I think that's what's different. A lot of traditional jobs you have, you know, there is more. It's not, dire is the wrong word, but there's something to be said when you're really just trying to make something work on its simplest of terms, and kind of what mindset that puts you in. But in a really exciting way, it's been super functional. You know, in a time that, you know, I wasn't sure we could have pulled it off, but every month and year that goes by, it feels like a thing that's going to exist long term.
That's no small feat too, to have, you know, kept that running and build it as you've done all these other things too. Yeah,
thanks. And then I think the goal even with Ghost Ramp would be, I love even just for opening up bandwidth, like if we can get a little bit more locked into a groove, like I have an employee, Michael, who's a legend, like, you know, get him even more involved, hire one, you know, I think for any small business owner, it's like, there's that real big challenge of handing off like labor, because it's like your baby or whatever, but at the same time, it's just a necessary thing. Like, free up more time for the next project. And I think I tend to be kind of an optimistic person, and I've had a fulfilling, exciting life with it. So it's hard to not try to feel energized by it. There's some very practical things that are really frustrating and daunting about it, and some things I really would hope to see change. I think in the last year or two, there's been some, you know, there's some positivity. The reinterest in physical and in vinyl has been the only reason these labels can exist. You know, which is an exciting part. And yes, it's not the biggest, most stable bedwetting thing. It's an old, cacophonous, archaic. Just making vinyl is a real pain in the ass and takes a long time. And there's shipping implications. There's environmental implications, which are hard to wrestle with sometimes. It's kind of a wasteful. It's just a weird thing. But the fact that there is this, in this digital era, there's this deep interest in a physical product is really interesting to me, and also it is a fulfilling, you know, that kind of brings us back to that human element part of it. You know, in having the store, you literally hand the person the record.
Yep.
When I was on the road with the band, you know, interacting with the fans in that way, it's a really exciting part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So that is, I don't think that's going anywhere.
This is the title track, Going Steady, from Patrick's album, Going Steady.
What's impressive, all those things you're juggling at once.
I feel lucky to be able to do it, and hopefully this year it just kind of hones in even more.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of the general scope.
Man. Well, I'm a fan and excited to see what you turn out.
Thanks, brother.
Excited to see what you keep creating, and your approach is inspiring. The way you kind of meld all these different things together, and you stay true to the artwork all the while.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's not. There's definitely moments where you lose track of where you're at, or you miss 3 emails from the artist you're working on. And you feel horrible about yourself. Or,
yeah.
But at its core, I mean, I feel super lucky that a lot of my peers and the people that inspired me to move through this whole thing, we're still doing it, and I don't think it's changing anytime soon. And every month there, meeting, it still feels like there's this great pace of meeting new people and exciting people, and there's more cross-pollination and more, it doesn't feel like it's getting more closed, you know? Yeah. And that's something that I think is why I'm so drawn to this stuff in the first place. Even if I collapse down and focus on a smaller subset of projects, there's still this constant flow of exciting ideas and people, and
right.
I'm sure that's why, whether you have your own thing day to day, but why you do this and talk to people, it's so fun to just connect consistently. And I think music for me has always meant that. I can't imagine. I can move somewhere and I instantly have friendships and stuff. You know, it's crazy how connective it is, and I'm addicted and excited to that, and it's a really special part of it also. You know,
absolutely.
The more the merrier, and like I think for me even, yes, I finally kind of put roots down, but I've been so mobile in the past decade that like it still feels like, oh man, like I've hit 1 year in a house. Like, I think I calculated I had moved like something like 14 times in 6 years or something like that.
So you're tolerant of the chaos.
Yeah, totally. So almost just like really, I think it excites me to be like, I guess I admire when I see you run into someone who's like, oh yeah, I've been here for 15 years and we've built this thing and that thing, you know. I love the movement, and I'm sure I'll travel and do all this stuff, but I hope to kind of like, like I said, the mantra is sort of focusing and building what's already sort of, the beginnings of the development are already there, and just kind of expanding is what's exciting to me.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. And it's a fun time, you know, as a creative, someone with creative interests, and this show being sort of at the moment, my creative outlet. It's a fun time to be alive.
Truly,
because
man.
you can connect instantly.
It's wild.
And you share stories, and you can meet people through it, and it feels constructive, and it feels
big
like
time.
You know, you're giving something from your heart and something that you care about, putting it out there. If nobody hears it, it's not that much of a loss.
Totally,
it's not a loss at all.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing. You know, someone you idolize, someone you want to connect with, they'll just respond to your email. I mean, it doesn't always happen.
Yeah,
but even it's amazing how connected people are. And then, like you're saying, you know, I've looked, maybe it's just a survival instinct, but I've looked towards like, if I can have a level of peer-based acceptance that my ego, whatever you want to call it, is like fed, where it's like I love what I'm doing, you know, and beyond that, it's not up to me really, or none of it is, I guess, but it's hard to really even worry about what's next other than what you're putting in. So, but I think at a certain level, believing in what you're doing, and there's definitely you need some positive reinforcement to continue. And so I think that's an important phase. And I feel like, I've been able to have people around me that have, you know, championed it and cheered me through it.
That's great. That's not to be undervalued, just that emotional support.
Yeah,
even if it's from two fans.
Yeah, big time. It really makes it worthwhile. And even seeing bigger band, like, it's funny, those random one messages, even to like someone who's already doing so well, it's like that's still what makes it worth it.
Definitely.
You know, over the like 10,000 retweets or whatever. It's like one person being like, this changed my life or whatever. So.
Yeah, speaking of that, the ability to reach out to people, you know, George Saunders is?
No,
he's a writer. He's a fiction writer, mainly.
Awesome.
Short stories, novels, or he's written one novel. But he's I love his work. He sort of he made me realize how much I love to read. Sort of after I was out of school.
Awesome.
And anyway, he's a teacher at Syracuse University, and I sent him a handwritten letter, trying to get him on the show.
Awesome.
The show. And I put my email in there to give him a chance at getting back to me.
Yeah.
And he did. And even that was exciting.
Yeah,
he was
that's
like,
so
he
cool.
bothered. He read my thing. He's very grateful, and he's like a busy, but check with with the publisher. Still to be determined. Someday, George, you'll be on the show.
I don't doubt it. Don't doubt it for a minute.
But anyway, it's just cool. It's like people like that. They went through it. They're supportive of people trying to do it, and it's kind of. It's an exciting human collaboration, sort of ongoing. Yeah,
and you need the people that are the inspiring kind of like those successful people that have done it. Like that's so important that they kind of pass that torch and you know and enlighten and keep all this moving. And you know, I think if for a lot of I'm genuinely surprised and that how often those people come to bat and are very accessible and awesome. You know,
it's really cool.
You know, it feels like there's a big gatekeeper in front of it, but sometimes it's just like, weirdly easier than you'd expect. It's cool.
Yeah. What do you? So speaking of that, any advice for a person just getting involved in music or with musical aspirations?
Yeah, I'd say going in, believing in yourself in a sense, but knowing that it's a long form approach, and not putting too many eggs in one basket, and not trying to burn out over a quick splash in the pan. Like don't if your first record or art project or experiment isn't met to resounding accolades, like don't think that is your failure. And that doesn't mean, you know, mortgage your entire life and rack up $200,000 in credit card debt just to keep like selfishly making stuff. It's sort of just like practically try to build the most sustainable life you can that is as close to your pursuit as possible, and keep working on the side, and knowing that it's, you know, even when you work 40 hours a week, there's still a lot of other time.
Sure.
You know, there is sacrifices to be made, but there's still a lot of time,
right,
and energy to put stuff out.
Absolutely.
And I think also don't put too much pressure on yourself in like a linear year sense. Like if because you have a full-time job, if your record takes you 3 years to make instead of 6 months if you had no job, it just is what it is sometimes. And you'll have to take some risks, and there'll be those moments where you'll have to kind of personally calculate like which direction you want to go and which part of your life to emphasize. But I think knowing that, you know, finding that passion within your, you know, kind of artistic scope that keeps you really fulfilled, but can still sort of work alongside what you might be doing otherwise, or maybe there's a perfect marriage of exactly how you want it to be. I mean, some people can really find that sweet spot. But you know, for a lot of us, it meant working in the bar, doing the live sound thing, working that label job that might have been less money than if you just took the standard, you know, sales or marketing gig or whatever. You know, but I think there's still got to be a level of sort of self-care and general quality of life that's going to foster your artistic side. And I think if you're just hell-bent on making something work without focusing on those other aspects, it's going to be really hard to succeed.
The long game and being more fluid with your expectations, and that shouldn't be taken as like devaluing or discrediting the premise of hard work or ambition or wanting something to happen quickly, but also realizing or being okay with the idea that maybe the success, whatever that means to you, is probably going to be a byproduct of being in the mix on a day-to-day basis, building relationships, testing new things out. Maybe your project next week is something you never saw coming, but because you were kind of open-minded with it and agile, and, you were able to go down a path that you didn't see coming.
For sure. You know? And I think on the like the positive side of all of it too, it's like definitely celebrate the mini victories and the little moments, because that's what it's all about. And, you know, surround yourself with the best people and friends and collaborate, you know, as much as possible, which I think people are like, it's such a exciting time for that. I think more than ever, you know, your buddy can live in Japan and you can send tracks and stems across the ocean and fucking work on tunes that way. Like it's such a good time for that. And so don't hesitate to reach out to anyone at any time and kind of go through that. But yeah. And I think at the end of the day, you still got to have fun with the moments that are exciting and good, and knowing that, that positive energy sort of leads to the next thing. You just got to keep hauling until that sort of moment happens, and you know, we all build it in our own way from there. And it might not mean that you then become the huge artist, but then you have your label or your record store or your art collective nonprofit. You know, there's so many ways that it manifests. So
Patrick McDermott.
Yes.
High five.
Dude, this was fun.
Very fun.
Yeah,
you're a good
awesome.
man.
You
Inspiration.
Too, brother.
Thanks again, man.
Dude, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So long, listeners. Love you.
Later.
Enjoy more from the album Going Steady by North Americans, a.k.a. Patrick McDermott, today's guest. Thank you, Patrick, for being on the show. Thank you for making the music. Thanks, Aaron Mason and Caitlin Watkins. Thank you to Roos for your artistic contributions to the episode. And thanks, as always, to everyone for tuning in. Take a look at Patrick's website, Driftless, that's Driftless, recordings.com. Order yourself a vinyl, maybe a t-shirt. Thank you for tuning in. This is Ty McDonald, and we'll see you next time.